Welcome to my show. Welcome to my channel. We're going to talk a little bit about Ascension. Break it down. If you're born into the fall, you have no knowledge and no wisdom on how to get back into the temple. You have no key codes, you have no divine codes, you have no blueprints to the temple, no blueprints to the water. People have lost their symbols, they've lost their inner journey, inner coordinates to be able to understand where they are within the realms of heaven on earth and Ascension. People can feel the vibrations, but they don't know what they are, where they come from. They can say certain things: galactic, Mother Earth, Source, Sirius, whatever. Planets, and then you get into the chakras and, rainbows and whatever. There's a lot of people on different levels, different frequencies. But it comes down into the mind of understanding the truth of Ascension, then the truth of the fall. So when you're looking at symbolism, just the word alone, people can't see. They've been cut off from Mother Earth, Father Sky, Great Spirit, the animals, sacred animals, the water, Spirit of Truth. You have as above, so below, within and without, that people don't understand, but they regurgitate it. And that's the same thing with the Bible and everything. See, the things that take place within are taking place without. And as above, so below. Here you're looking at the sun setting in the west. And when the sun sets, it is gold and it is blue. Gold and blue make green. So, there's a lot of as above, so below, within and without, that people can't understand when it comes to the chakras and, stuff. Because people don't know about the portholes. They don't understand the portholes. They don't understand what's on Turtle Island on a frequency scale within Mother Earth, Gaia, Sophia, and the lifting up of the divine feminine dragon bloodline, the 13th dragon bloodline, back into God's house, fixing the DNA, fixing the blueprints of Divine Mother's temple. Because the green ray, the emerald heart chakra, so you were kind of getting ahead of myself, but this is all the reflection of entering into the temple. Emerald ray, heart chakra. But we're gonna, it's an alchemical creation in Hermes' lab. But people, just talk, and then you got all this stuff today about fake Egypt and all the bullshit coming out of there. But I have a map, and the map is really, the people need to see. The people need to see with their eyes what everything means, because they've lost their symbols. They've been locked out of God's house. with the fallen ones. And that's the part where you tell people, you're in the fall, you're in Babylon. Well, what does it mean? People can't comprehend it. They think it's in the past. But that's all part of the manipulation of being born into this realm with no wisdom of the past. Because, ancestors, elders, everyone was slaughtered, blood was spilt on every timeline. So we're just going to travel to a map, and I'll break down a little bit, because it's, everyone's talking about Atlantis, everyone's talking about Lemuria, and upgrading their DNA and becoming enlightened and blah, blah, blah. Nobody can advance. No one can ascend before Mother Earth and Divine Mother and the Pleiadians, because people don't understand spiritually. There's all these stories, all these fairy tales of timelines and all this stuff from the Greek wars and Rome and Nordic times and everything that was in ancient history. But returning back to something you don't know, regaining the powers and understanding things you don't know is difficult, because people don't and can't comprehend what was lost. You can say God, you can say Creator, Great Spirit, but what is it truly when one's not connected to Mother Earth and understanding the rays and the frequencies that come from her? Because there are animals. There's all kinds of animals. But within the frequencies of creation, of how man has fallen. And you see the situation today of over-masculinity and no balance between the men and the women. It's because of the DNA and what happened in heaven. And that's where it all starts. And what happens within creation reflects back into humanity. And that's the part of where humanity don't understand who they are today. Because if there was no problems in heaven, there would be no problems on earth. For the most part, because, there's been so much manipulation over every timeline, and it comes into the animals, into the spirit of things, into you, into your spirit animals, sacred animals. But I'm going to show you a map, and I'll kind of, we've been ascending, and I put it in the perspective of, it's cleaning up the temple. It's taking back symbolism, destroying black magic, reversing things, cleaning up the elementals, and realigning planets in a spiritual sense that no one can see and no one can understand, because it's on the soul level, within the work that I do to help. People say, being a star seed and being a light worker, but how much do they truly understand of the work that they are doing? That comes into the awakened mind, So what has been taking place is going back into time and reversing black magic and taking back symbols and fixing time, fixing Divine Mother's time of creation through the alchemical recreation of the sun and the water, It comes down to Hermes' lab within the water, and that's recreating blueprints, breaking everything down, stripping it apart, and rebuilding it. It is a house. It is blueprints to the temple. Blueprints to the temple is blueprints to the body and the DNA and the rainbow. Returning the people to a timeline of heaven on earth. But see, there's the situation outside. A lot of people can't comprehend as a whole, because of them being mind controlled in the Matrix. And we were all in the Matrix. So there's no one who can say that they've been enlightened or they know everything or whatever it is, because everything that has come out of ancient history, spiritual teachings, were all corrupted. There was no wisdom, knowledge today. There may be a few, Druid, shaman, Africans, Asians, secret societies, but you get into the root of it all. It was all torn down, and we'll say Babylon was torn down spiritually over these past years, because it is the blueprints to the temple. But it's not over there, it's across the pond, it's within America, and that's the part where people don't know what's under their feet. And so, people can talk on many different timelines. They can talk on stuff, but they don't understand the interdimensional warfare, spiritual warfare that is taking place today, and everything that has been removed from Mother Earth and from the Divine Mother and the lineage of the 13th dragon bloodline, the Pleiadians, and rebuilding the calendar. So we're looking at a map here. There's so much information. There's so much information within this one map, and I'll try and break it down on timelines, because it's really the only map that you need. A lot of people do ley line work. Some people do know, where they're located and doing the work. But, there's the Ouroboros, there's the circle, there's dragons and nagas and rainbow prophecy. And then here you have the blue Kachina, and you have the dragon line and the Native American line, Acadian line. You have the mounds, you have the Mississippi, and if you looked at this map back in 2012, you really wouldn't. I didn't know. But the research over time and understanding how everything took place on Turtle Island. Because if you look around the world and you look at the temples in Peru and Mexico and China and Asia and Japan and all the temples to the south and into Asia and so forth, and you look at Russia and and everything, people have the outer perspective of the Tartarian timeline, or the Mayan timeline, and everything that was here before. But when there's no time, and time is standing still, and time has been fixed, all of these frequencies from past timelines are here and now, and that is what's taking place outside, because it's a returning back to, as people would say, Lemuria. We're reconnecting Atlantis and Lemuria, returning back to heaven on earth. But it's deeper than anyone could imagine, because they don't see the portholes and the timelines here, because you have the Rainbow Prophecy, you have Turtle Island, you have dragons and nagas and temples and stuff like this. But you have the Blue Kachina, and the Blue Kachina is a different perspective, because you're only looking at it in a North American, Native American way. So if you're looking at a battle, you're looking at war, you're looking at the East Coast, you're looking at the Caribbeans, you're looking at Philadelphia and the Carolinas, and all of the stuff that came from the East. You can look down into Maya and so forth, but when it comes to the Blue Kachina, it destroyed China before it came over America, because China was coming from the West, and so it destroyed them and set them back. And but the Blue Kachina came over America. People say, oh, okay, over the Four Corners, but then it comes over the Great Lakes, and it comes over northeast of America. What came out of the Kachina is a different thing. That's the King Arthur timeline. Because they don't want you to know that the timeline of King Arthur, timeline of Merlin, and all this Rosicrucian medieval stuff, and the Druidic stuff, Nordic stuff, took place here in America. They don't want you to know that every timeline of ancient history took place here in America. You have some stuff over there, but it's all connected to America, because this is the entrance point back into heaven on earth, back into heaven. Because the timelines of ancient history, the biblical times, Greece, Egypt, the fallen timelines, have to come through the East Coast, through Philadelphia. And what people can't see, people say Atlantis and Lemuria, but how far is Lemuria away from Atlantis? Because you go back into time, we're talking about the cataclysms. We're talking about land masses hitting each other. We're talking about the Big Bang. We're talking about the flood. Because the timelines of Greece and Egypt and stuff like that all reside on the East Coast and in Florida, and all you gotta do is look at the water and everything that is connected to the Mediterranean and so forth. But But then you have the Blue Kachina that came over, and you have Blue Ridge Mountains, and like I said, what people can't see is the Mercury, the Iron Shield, what came up out of underneath the temples that were here. Because the ATL, Atlantis, being a Mayan word, Atlantis, ATL, is a Mayan word. And that's part of where people don't know what they speak. It's very easy to translate Spanish or old languages into English just by manipulating a few words, and that's the part where people lost their magic of understanding letters and numbers and circles and squares and how things are created. So where there are no temples is where the entrance point is into heaven. But it's on the earth. And it's as above, so below. And it's Orion's belt. And it's the entrance point. The stars are aligned on Turtle Island, Pleiadians, Hyperborealis, Ecliptic Line. As above, so below. But no one can feel, no one understands that we already flipped. The poles have been realigned because that's what took place. So the work that I've done when I talk about, going to certain locations and doing work at certain locations, what is on the East Coast and what is the reflection of them worshiping Osiris, them worshiping Egypt, them worshiping Isis, and that whole thing. Because it's all the reflection outside of the temple. Because you're not seeing the temple. You're not seeing the mountain on Turtle Island. It doesn't matter where you reside. You don't have the inner coordinates of being able to enter back into the frequencies of the sacred animals and the water and Divine Mother and the prophecy of the purity of the Divine Mother. There's an iron shield on the west. There's an iron shield on the East Coast. There's an iron shield on this line that runs underneath these temples. The mercury bubbles within the water, but you can't see the mercury. So you have things of the as above, so below, within and without. And no one talks on the Bermuda Triangle. That goes back to Atoria. It locks the frequencies and the alignments and aligning the 13 colonies back into a point of reflecting the 13th moon, because the entrance point, what is up here? So you have all of this stuff. People look at this stuff. People don't know you have the Native American line. See, all this stuff here on the East Coast, people know of the mounds, people know of all this stuff, but they don't know what is up here on the Northeast, okay? Well, I'm the one that did the work at the Serpent Mound. I'm the one that did the work at the Finger Lakes. And I'm the one that did the work at the Acadian National Park. These 3 points of interest are beyond anyone's comprehension of what the truth is when it comes to ascension. The demonic frequencies and everything that has embedded itself into Mother Earth through the dragon frequencies and the coming into the Hyperborealis and the coming into the bloodline and the DNA of Divine Mother's creation into the Nordic times. So you want to talk about why it got so cold this winter? Were you waiting for someone to tell you that the ice was the Blue Kachina? People don't have the spirit of understanding anything today. That's the problem. It's a timeline loop. So when you're talking about people fell out of the Mayan times, what does it really mean? You're living on a false calendar today, not knowing astrology, not knowing the frequencies of time. Because these portholes were all corrupted, and all these portholes of time traveling were corrupted interdimensionally. Because here on the Northeast, you're talking about, this is the 13 colonies is not a part of, the Mary and stuff. It's all part of Atlantis, but it's it's like a cliff, within the dragon frequencies. The lion bites his own tail, the finger legs, the Ouroboros, and it's an invisible spiritual thing within the waters. But the reversal of the magnetic poles in the work that I did up in Maine, reversing the poles, going out into the water on a boat under the moon and reversing the waters. So the inner sun of Mother Earth can project. So the Mercury can be reversed within Mother Earth and re-alchemize the gold. So Mercury can transform into gold and shine the rainbow through. Because that's what happened back in October, November, when those auroras came. So people want to talk about reversals. So if we're reversing or we are realigning, doesn't that mean that the map should turn? Seems like the map should turn a little bit. So it's a little clockwise. But, so now you can see the direction traveled. Because they come out of the water. They come out of the swamp. They come out of the shit. They come out of the darkness, attempting to come onto the land and be human. Because they, in the swamps of Florida, in the swamps of Philadelphia, because it's a city built on swampland. It's not even on the land. That's the thing. And then it's built in the form of a temple, an invisible temple, because they destroyed everything that was here. Judah, land of Judah, the lion, because the lion and the dragon, the lion and the serpent, lion and the bird, lion being the gold, you got the green serpent, and then you got the red bird. But there's a lot of spiritual manipulation and confusion because everything is within. So when you're looking outside of yourself, all of that reflection, all of that darkness is taking place within. And the chaos and the rage and everything that took place over ancient history is repeating itself because they have been locked out of God's house. They've been locked out of God's kingdom. Divine Mother. You know, you can get into the Jesus and Mary storyline, but you know, you talk about that, then you're religious. And that's a lot of it, where people breaking free from religion. But that's a whole mindset within itself. It's the truly coming back within and understanding what's under your feet, understanding the rainbow prophecy, the crystal pyramids that have already been activated. You can't see them because your frequency is not high enough and you're not allowed into the temple. There's a lot of rainbow activity, inner rainbow activation taking place today. They who have come and created this reality have been destroyed and removed from Mother Earth, and they have no more power of black magic, of worshiping something that doesn't belong to them. None of the symbolism belongs to the fallen ones. They're just fallen demons who wish to get back into heaven. And see, that's the part of the New Agers who don't understand. You're in the same realm as them. You can't escape. Everyone is trying to ascend or get back into heaven. But how can you get back into heaven if you don't know the key codes? How can you fully get back into understanding in the awakened mind of what timeline you are on today? Because if I told you where we've been over these years, and especially over these past 6 months of going backwards in time, the frequencies of chaos and rage and jealousy, which created the fall out of heaven, have all been transmuted. And all of the ones who have caused and created this fall and this breakup in heaven, these frequencies are not kosher within the realms of heaven. These elements, these frequencies which came in and destroyed humanity, have been removed, and there is peace again and love again amongst the twin flames of heaven within the symbolism of the temple. Not this fake ass temple in Israel. The mountaintop, the mountain you can't see within the spirit, because it has blueprints, and it takes an architect to understand. It takes a mason, the only mason who has come to rebuild the temple. There's no more Illuminati. There's no more fallen masons. All this stuff you see out there is crap. Because the blueprints belong to the people. The blueprints are already within you. You just need to understand and remember your lineage and your bloodline, and that you are water. You are spirit. And spirit has returned to you to awaken you. Awaken your knowledge, awaken you to your rainbow prophecy. Because the rainbow prophecy is an individual path of enlightenment. But it must be obtained in the awakened mind. Stay away from false light, fake galactic people. Because it's just an extension of fake religion. They have stolen all the magic from every timeline and every culture and turned it into religion. But now is the time to take it all back, because it already has been taken back. But if you can't see and you don't understand, the frequencies of what's happening. But see, that's the part where nobody is allowed. No one's allowed through the gate till they purge themselves. And that's where the Exodus comes into play. That's where the fall of humanity comes into play. The seizures, the erratic behaviors, the craziness in the mind, the nervousness, anxiety, the frequency of fear and being scared, the frequency of death when being alive. So you have these lines, and so you have the Akkadian timeline, Blue Kachin timeline, Native American timeline, and what we got up here, Dragon timeline. So, these were just reflecting past timelines, all into the now moment. And I think the eclipse last year went along the Dragon bloodline and went along the Akkadian line, and it kind of met somewhere here in the middle. I'm not really sure, maybe at the ATL, Illinois, but the whole thing with Tartaria and all this stuff that goes back into history, you look at everything that has been, everything that has left, Russia and India and China, and you got to reflect what was here on Turtle Island. I just got these visions in my head of, hats and what people used to wear, to reflect what they would see in their visions. Because this is, the rainbow prophecies on the East Coast. Like, you see it, you're seeing what comes out of the auroras, it's a beautiful thing. The frequencies of Gaia have changed dramatically. She has disconnected herself from the darkness. And, and you talk about Mary, the reflection of Mary Magdalena. It's, Jesus, and, there's a lot of, so many timelines that reflect Divine Mother, the wife and the daughter and the children. It's the same story on every timeline. But we, Nordic, white, blue-eyed ones who came from the north, the Druidic Scottish path, the key codes, the ones who hold the key codes to the lion and the unicorn and the dragon, through the Rosicrucian Druidic path of having everything downloaded onto your soul through Divine Mother's wisdom, Divine Father's wisdom, of what is truly held sacred within the water. So there's a lot, to understand, but it takes a lot of time, because that's why this ascension, this time traveling back into time, it's been many years, and a lot of people think that nothing is going on, that it's just going to stay this way within the human frequency. People can continue down that road, and they can go walk right into their alternative reality, go live in one of these smart cities. But we'll see how far that comes and how far that goes. Because the revolution, the revolt, all comes back into the mind of understanding. And that's what the symbols, the kundalinis and the dancing of the twins and the fire and the water and purifying the blood. Because things, especially last summer, coming back into, it's going back into time. So, explaining what today is on the frequency level of Mother Earth, people won't get it because it's frequencies. Frequency needs to come first before creation. Creation comes from frequencies. So when they talk about manifestation, you got to have elements, you got to have symbols and planets, and you're born under when you're born under certain alignments, astrology, zodiac lines. Those are the main, animals that you're connected to. But that's kind of like, the point of where you fell from. They talk about being born. So if you're trying to ascend into a higher realms, how are you going to get into the higher realms back into heaven if you don't understand the porthole you just came through from heaven? So it's a loop. So you came from heaven, blinded by the darkness of even understanding you're being a baby and coming through Divine Mother's porthole. Not just your parents, but your Divine Mother. And maybe having glimpses of heaven, and maybe having glimpses of when you were a child. But all of that memory of coming through that porthole was taken away from you because you weren't the only one born into this realm. People think that only certain people are possessed, or, it has and was in everything. It was in the water. This is why people don't understand what the natives are talking about. See, when Babylon falls, which it's falling, and has been, people don't understand. It's not the language barrier, it's the knowledge barrier, it's the wisdom. Because I'm not in your timeline. I'm an interdimensional being traveling different timelines. You can call me an alien. That's people's favorite word because it was told to them. But I come from the water. So people want to talk of what is going on and what has happened. The Finger Lakes, when I went to the Finger Lakes, that's when the ancestors were set free. Ancestors were set free. Blood was purified. Transmutation of the fire and the water in an alchemical sense. An alchemy sense. See people looking over at France and looking all that stuff for the Rosicrucians or the Druids or the mystical times. See, there's dragons here. There's a dragon temple. There's the Finger Lakes, as above, so below. And we talk about Orion, and we talk about dragon chasing the Pleiadians. There's a family of dragons in heaven. So that's where they get the reference of the dragon in Lucy. The dragons aren't bad. It's just the manipulation of the mind and the hijacking of the dragons and using the dragons' energy against you and stealing their energy and their dragon eggs. And so the entrance point, where did entrance point back into heaven? The entrance point, where is the exit out of heaven? Where was the first piece of land that was created? See, that's where people think, outside of themselves, in a universal scale of outside, somewhere else, and not under their feet, because that's the frequency of confusion, Big Bang, Ice Age, stuff like that. So, the Big Bang, mountaintop, the northeast of America. There's, things were reversed, the Big Bang, you look at ancient lakes and you look at rivers and how this land was created today. And that's part of what I have studied, going back into billions of years of the land masses and studying the land masses and collisions and the reversal, because everything was ice. It wasn't that it was just ice, it was what was behind the ice. So there's a lot of frequencies, because they talk about Enoch and they couldn't follow him through the storm. You have the Blue Kachina, you have ice storms, which just happened this winter. And when ice storms happen, everything freezes. It's not just outside, it's also within. Because everything outside of you is elemental. Everything that is within you is elemental. You are of creation, but you have been hijacked by demons. And your DNA was corrupted. Mother Earth's DNA was corrupted. So you get back to the basics of what the DNA is. No one knows, because it's an alchemical creation in Hermes' lab. It is transformation out of the water. But you must have frequencies to go along. You got to have a numerical code. You must have symbols. You must have a frequency that runs through, as people would say, the 3, 6, and 9 Tesla. But people don't get it. They don't know truly how that reflects within them. Because that's another part of what came out of Philly, is the Philadelphia experiment, where they made the Navy ship disappear. So where's the portal? Mason-Dixon line? What were they trying to map? The Mason-Dixon line. People saw stuff a lot more than you see today. Because what would it have been like with no TV? No manipulation of the government telling you a different story. These are medieval times. These are Native Americans. There was stuff. People saw stuff. Space wars. A lot more interdimensional things. But they had the power to protect themselves from that. But eventually, it overcame. And so, the traveling, it's really, what timeline does a person want? They want to go back to heaven. And say, people can't see that, like Ireland and Scotland and all this stuff and how it's connected to America. This whole thing of the East Coast, like I said, there's a frequency here. There's a Rosicrucian church in my backyard. Okay. Rosicrucian church. So why is there a Rosicrucian church? And people think that, they came from over there and came here. They came from France or wherever and came here. But at one point in time, everything was connected. And those islands and everything has portholes and everything, time traveling and, while standing in place. So the traveling east to west within the symbolism, within the inner coordinates, is leaving Babylon. It's an exodus from Atlantis and back into Lemuria. The ones who invaded Atlantis and destroyed Atlantis, they have been removed, if you want to think about it in that aspect, who created the fall. There's no one truly knows how it was done. And, so everything, even if you see what you see in the material sense with the biblical times, and the biblical timeline will play out for people, but there is no frequency of the frequency. You get the timeline of Jesus sacrificing himself, surrendering himself, and Mary running, and that frequency that came after Mary is of no more. That's the removing of the demonic energy out of Mother Earth. It has been removed from the dragon bloodline, removed from the water. So the feminine, it's all part of realigning Mother Earth and Father Sky, and the masculine and the feminine within. And there are men who have sacrificed themselves over many timelines to stand for what is right, and that is being righteous, standing for the feminine and the child, and doing whatever it takes to be there for them. Because that's doing God's work. The mother, the wife, the daughter, it doesn't matter. This is why you see in history and the timelines of them sacrificing the feminine or killing the firstborn, first male. They don't want Christ the son, Christ the daughter, to sacrificing and killing, because they came into the fall. They're here with you, but we couldn't see. But now you can. And a lot of the feminine who have, a lot of trauma. And the trauma today has rolled over into, the past timeline trauma has rolled over into today in the frequency scale and can't be comprehended. Because it is that coming through a porthole. You being sacrificed in a past timeline, hung on that cross, being sacrificed. However you were killed, water or fire. And being chased in spirit, being reborn into this timeline, choosing to help Mother Earth free yourself from the trauma. Because all the feminine hold the same trauma. Even if it didn't happen to them, it happened to your Mother Earth. It's a frequency that invaded love and brought us down to an imbalance that no one should go through. And it starts with Mary. But they want to tell you a different story about Mary. They can all just go fuck off. Because I know the truth. Because I was there 2,000 years ago. I was there. I was there on every timeline. I know the truth and the frequency of every timeline. So we return back to the oneness and the unity after it's happening now, but people can't see it because people haven't fallen yet. They're ignoring the whole thing, trying to figure it out, but they can't comprehend it because it's spiritual. And we've been told ever since we were kids that about Babylon, the Exodus, Jah, Christmas, Easter. Oh yeah, it's almost Easter. The horny rabbit is coming. The horny rabbit that lays rainbow eggs. People go to church for Easter, and then they go search for rainbow rabbit eggs, rainbow serpent eggs. So it's a little confusing. So, just a little chitter chatter. Talking about this map. It's a time like no other. But if one continues to do the spiraling and not understand and keep their head in the sand, it doesn't matter. It's going to come and it's going to bite you. It's going to bite your spirit, your soul, because of what's going to take place out there. It takes a lot to get humanity to understand what heaven and hell is. Because you're on the threshold between realms. One in heaven, one in hell. And every night you go to sleep, most likely going into hell. Because you have to understand when you're awake that the same thing happens to you at night, being chased around by demons, is the same thing that happens during the day. But the demons are within other people. So, have a good day.